I agree with Aaron Boone. Jose Ramirez is not underrated anymore. But you know who is? The 30 players in today's video, one from every single team. So let's do it. Let's find the most underrated players in baseball division by division, starting with the East and ending with the Central. For the Atlanta Braves, I'm going with Spencer Schwellenbach. It's kind of crazy that the Braves have another ace and his name is Spencer. By the way, fun fact from Fuzzy, he was a shortstop turned starting pitcher. His final 18 starts of 2024 were magical, a 2.9 ERA with 108 strikeouts. His curveball and slider both have a 40% whiff rate. Don't forget, he also has a fastball that touches 96, 97, sometimes 98. Spencer Schwellenbach, he's not just a Strider replacement. He's here to stay. They call this guy X Xavier Edwards. If you've played MLB The Show, you know exactly who this is because his card is always raked. He's got to be the most underrated player on the Marlins because last year he quietly hit 328 with a 397. Let's just round up and call it 400 on base with 31 stolen bases in 70 games. If you're doing the math, that's a 72 stolen base pace over 162. Now, he does have to fix the defense. I'm not going to ignore that. He did have a negative 18 DRS and outs above average combined, but he doesn't chase, he doesn't whiff, he walks a lot, so I guess the defense, it'll come in due time. My jaw kind of dropped. I said, huh? When I was looking at this dude's stats for the New York Mets, the most underrated player has to be Dedniel Nunez. He had a 2.3 ERA, cool, a 12.3 strikeouts per 9 after putting up a 1.2-ish ERA with tons of strikeouts in AAA right before he got the call to the big leagues. He was basically a two-pitch pitcher last year. It was the slider at 48% and the four-seam at 47%. The slider was basically untouchable, a 145 batting average against it. So yeah, this guy knows a thing or two about snatching lunch money from hitters. Pick him up in 2025. Here we go. We have back-to-back relief pitchers, and Orion Kerkering had a lot more innings than Dedniel Nunez, and he was just as good. Actually, Orion had a 2.29 ERA with 74 strikeouts over 63 innings, and he wasn't even top 10 in Rookie of the Year. He uses that nasty, I mean nasty sweeper and the unhittable sinker to just torch hitters. The fact that a lot of you are just hearing about Nunez or Kerkering really shows that modern pitching is as good as it's ever been. If your great grandpappy, who's probably in a recliner, still says that Babe Ruth had it tougher, just hit the gritty and walk out. He'll have no idea what just hit him, and yeah, just leave it at that. The Washington Nationals, I'm going with forgotten Minnesota Luis Garcia Jr. He had such a slow and sluggish and kind of embarrassing start to his career to the point where we kind of just forgot he existed. And if you don't believe me, check this out. Over his first 324 games, Minnesota had 24 home runs and 13 stolen bases. Shohei does that in 1 month, it seems like. But after his manager challenged him, Luis Garcia Jr. broke out in 2024 with 18 home runs, 22 stolen bases. He basically matched his first 324 games in 1 year. He also was great defensively, 5 outs above average. It seems like he really took that feedback to heart. This is going to be a fun one because we got to play narrative ball with the Orioles' most underrated player, Ryan Mountcastle. Now, he only had 13 home runs last year, and it got worse as the season aged. He had 2 home runs and a 645 OPS his final 67 games. But here's where we get to play some narrative ball, why I think Mountcastle is actually slept on. He had 11 home runs taken away by that stupid wall out there in left field, the wall of doom. I believe that was the most taken away by any Orioles hitter. He still has elite bat speed, fantastic exit velocities, and I'm going to tip my cap and give him some credit. Fantastic defense. Everyone's kind of been saying that Mountcastle is simply keeping the food warm for Kobe Mayo or Basayo to eat it, but again, I like Mountcastle this year. I do. He's also 2 years away from free agency, so because he's kind of been so overhated, I actually think that he's become underrated. So I was talking to my editor about Wilyer Abreu. So my editor, Pesky Talk, he's a big Red Sox fan, and I can't believe that the Red Sox might have to move on from a guy like Wilyer Abreu to make room for a super prospect in Roman Anthony, because Wilyer, he's a stud. You could honestly make the case that he deserved Rookie of the Year last year because Wilyer Abreu had 33 doubles, 15 home runs, 6 outs above average, 16 defensive run saves, en route to winning a Gold Glove. He was top 20% in exit velocity, hard hit percentage, and bat speed. If you said that Wilyer was robbed of Rookie of the Year, honestly, if you're not a Yankees fan, you might agree with that. But yeah, a bunch of extra base hits, fantastic defense, and he hits the ball hard. Did not really expect that out of Wilyer Abreu. All right, I might get in trouble for this one because a lot of you might know who Clark Schmidt is, but I don't know if a lot of you realize how actually insane he is. From mid-April to the end of the season, I know there were some health issues that kind of scattered these numbers, but he had a 2.6 ERA from mid-April to the end of the season. He had 84 strikeouts, his final 75 innings. They finally developed that cutter to a point where he can get whiffs on it, and his knuckle curveball is... it's got to be one of the best knuckle curves in baseball today. Now that Luis Gil is on the shelf and Marcus Stroman looks like a bum, Clark Schmidt is going to have to really step up and be an anchor at the back end of that rotation. The most underrated player for the Rays has to be Drew Rasmussen. He came back last year and no one was talking about him, despite the fact that he was throwing absolute fire. He held opponents to a 171 batting average on the fastball. He had a 2.8 ERA from 2021 to 2023, so he's always been pretty good, but he never gets the respect of being a borderline elite starting pitcher. Although he wasn't a starter last year, he came back from Tommy John, so he was a reliever. And I'm not joking, I can't even tell you how many comments I got towards the end of MLB Recap last year from people saying, I didn't know Drew Rasmussen was back. Well, again, no one did. But put some respect on my man's name heading into 2025. He's about to break out all over again. One more name I'll throw out for the Rays, just super quick, an honorable mention. I almost went with Jonathan Aranda. He hits the ball very hard and has a very good eye. Some of the picks in this video are in part because MLB or some other creators kind of disrespected some of the players with their rankings, and Dalton Varsho is the first guy in that conversation. I love you, Mark. My man Giraffnik Mark, I just met him a few days ago. I believe that he ranked Dalton Varsho as not even like a top 20 left fielder or center fielder, whatever he was. Mark, I love you, buddy. What are we doing? Dalton was actually pretty decent in the second half with the stick before a rotator cuff issue ended his season early. He put up a 5 wins above replacement in 136 games because on top of being kind of decent in the second half, he had 28 defensive run saves and 16 outs above average. So he's an absolute wizard defensively, and I'll give him some credit. He sees lefties very, very well. So honestly, if he can get back to 2021 righty stats, you combine that with his lefty stats, the defense, the pop, the speed, Varsho is genuinely not a superstar, but he could be a star. Don't forget, he used to be a catcher. Him being this good defensively in the outfield almost doesn't make sense. We got the West Division coming up. I got the Diamondbacks up first, and Drey Jameson is throwing gas in spring training. This pick is definitely me getting ahead of the 8 ball because Drey's been in baseball before. He's gotten a little bit of some credit throughout his time, but he missed all of 2024 with an arm injury. But the fact that he's already throwing 100 plus in spring, you're not hitting his slider. He had a 2.6 ERA before Tommy John. And just another fun fact from Fuzzy, do you know that Drey Jameson beat Corbin Carroll in a race? He's a freak athlete. So with all that being said, that's why I think Drey is underrated, because he's coming off an injury and I don't think anyone realizes how good of an athlete he is. Fuzzy, yeah, you got this wrong. You got Ezequiel Tovar for the Rockies. Everyone knows who Ezequiel Tovar is. Well, honestly, I don't think so. And I say that because many people don't realize the monstrous season he just had was at 22 years old. He led the National League with 45 doubles. He had 26 home runs. He also had a combined 26 outs above average and defensive run saves. I'm going to be a little bit dramatic right here. Maybe this is too far, but Ezequiel Tovar is literally an on-base issue away from being a top 20 player in baseball. There, I said it. It almost doesn't make sense because he's a product of the Rockies system. Like, they just don't develop well at all, but that's kind of been changing recently. And Tovar is leading the charge. If he can get on base even 33% of the time, top 20 player. And people don't even see that talent, but it's there. The Dodgers, it's almost like no one's really underrated because they've been so good for so long. They're coming off a chip. Who's really underrated? Well, Alex Vesia, the lefty out the pen, he's been a top 10, maybe even top 5 reliever 3 of the last 4 years. He turned in a 1.7 ERA last year, and if you take a look at his postseason success, he has an even tinier 1.2 ERA in the playoffs. He has that unfair fastball and slider combination like Dedenel Nunez that we talked about for the Mets, but unlike Dedenel, his bread and butter is actually the fastball. He just kind of says, I'm going to throw it now. Try and hit it. Who do we got for the San Diego Padres? I went through their depth chart, and Jeremiah Estrada, he kind of stuck out as the guy that I should talk about the most. He had a sub-3 ERA last year for the Padres with some of the best strikeout stuff of anyone. He had a 30% whiff rate on 2 different pitches, the fastball and the slider, and then he broke out the splitter with a 51% whiff. So when he threw that splitter, over half the time, guys swung at it and missed it. Back-to-back relievers, I got Ryan Walker for the Giants because he's a real-life toxic creative player from MLB The Show, like someone with a goofy name that throws 95, 96 from the side. He actually does that. He has the most amount of fastballs at 95 plus miles an hour from the side over the last few seasons. By the way, it's not a gimmick. He had a 1.9 ERA last season with a whopping 177 strikeouts his last 141 innings. This Ryan Walker guy is gross. He was always kind of flying under the radar because he wasn't the closer Camilo Doval was. He's the guy now. Here's a sentence for you guys. Yainer Diaz is a framing issue away from becoming a top 3 catcher in all of Major League Baseball. Yainer Diaz, I mean, aside from not having the best framing stuff, he's actually pretty good at blocking and throwing runners out. But the reason why we love Diaz is because he hits .299 with 16 home runs a season after hitting 23 home runs as a rookie. I feel like I might get a little bit of pushback on that one, but because Yainer has been pretty special in back-to-back seasons and hasn't even made an all-star team, he's got to be my pick. Blame Major League Baseball for this one. It's not me. This is really a product of MLB ranking Mike Trout as the 39th best player in baseball. This is with Mike Trout, the GOAT, by the way, having 10 home runs, 6 stolen bases, and a 140 OPS plus in 29 games last year. That's a 55 home run, 33 stolen base pace. He's a Rookie of the Year, a 3-time MVP. He's Mike Trout. He is not the 39th best player in baseball. I don't care about health. He could be on one leg and have one pinky. He's a top 20 player at the least, even when not healthy. The same is for Jacob deGrom. The fact that Major League Baseball knows Jacob is pretty much healthy and they still ranked him as the 100th best player going into 2025, like, no. I know he's 36 years old, but just like Trout, he's a Rookie of the Year. He's almost got as many Cy Youngs as Trout has MVPs with 2. He is 36 years old, sure, but still throws 98 plus with a devastating slider. What are we doing putting Mike Trout at 39 and Jacob deGrom at 100? Like, it's not my fault they're in this video. It's MLB's. JJ Bleday, have yourself a day. I said that a lot last year because JJ Bleday quietly had 43 doubles. 20 home runs isn't earth-shattering by any means, but he also had a 120 OPS plus. He doesn't strike out or chase a lot. He has an absolute hose for an arm. He does have to work on his reads a little bit on fly balls hit in front of him, but the fact that Brent Rooker got a lot of shine, Lawrence Butler got a lot of shine, same with Mason Miller, JJ Bleday had to be the guy. His breakout made me very happy because the Athletics, honestly, they're really up and coming, and he's going to be a big piece of that puzzle. I really like this next pick. I know a lot of you guys understand Bryan Woo is a good pitcher, but do you realize Bryan Woo is borderline elite? Bryan has a 2.9 ERA since mid-September of 2023. That's about 140-ish innings. He has elite ×2, elite walks per 9 stuff, which means that he doesn't walk anyone. He has one of the better fastball sinker combinations, so he can tunnel really well, but because it's the same grip and it moves different areas, it's so hard to hit. Combine that with a wipeout sweeper, and it's easy to see why Bryan Woo is one of the more unhittable and underrated pitchers in baseball because he's a 5th starter. He's kind of blocked by all the other big names in that Mariners rotation. Over the last few years, Jose Ramirez has kind of been the consensus most underrated player in baseball, and I'm going to go with Ian Happ as maybe taking the crown as the most underrated or just most underappreciated year in and year out. Cubs fans have told me that the reason why they don't really give Ian Happ as much credit as he deserves is he's not clutch. I looked up his stats. He had a 1.012 OPS and high leverage spots last year. Maybe that was a fluke, but yeah, he was really good when it mattered. Ian Happ is also a walking 60 extra base hits, a 120 OPS plus. He's won a Gold Glove 3 years in a row. Again, he's going to give you 4 WAR. Just pencil it in. He gets love, yeah, but not nearly enough. He's kind of become the Jose Ramirez where people know about him. He does get a lot of love, but it's just not enough. I got to go Gavin Lux. It has to be Gavin Lux for the Reds. People are not talking about this enough. From July 11th to the end of 2024, the end of the season, he looked like super prospect Gavin Lux. He hit .306 with a .903 OPS. This was the first year back after having that ACL issue in spring training. Don't forget that when he injured that, he was top 9% in speed. So we get Gavin Lux in... It's not Citizens Bank Park. Why did I write that? The Reds playing Great American Ballpark, you dummy. I don't know what I was thinking when I scripted this. But yeah, Gavin Lux in a cheat code ballpark, putting up those monster numbers in the second half. Like, July 11th to the end of the season is no small sample size. And hitting 310, that's not easy. But yeah, please respect Gavin Lux. He was an absolute savage to end last year. This might sound like blasphemy or like I'm being dramatic, but I think I stand behind it. Garrett Mitchell, to me, is a top 10 top 15 athlete in all of baseball. He's top 5% in speed, bat speed, plate discipline, so his eye is godlike. He had 8 home runs and 11 stolen bases in 69 games last year. That's a near 20 home run, 30 stolen base season. He had 3 outs above average in the outfield, and again, he is an athlete, so he's got a cannon. When he was coming up through the Brewers farm system, he was one of my favorite prospects. I collected his cards, but injuries and not performing to his best kind of just hampered his stock. It's back. I genuinely feel like he's going 2020 with platinum defense. So that was the most underrated player for the Brewers. The most underrated Pirates player, again, blame Major League Baseball for this. They did not have Brian Reynolds in the top 100, even though he had 24 home runs, a 120 OPS plus. He's averaging 25 home runs with a near 130 OPS plus the last 4 seasons. What do you mean, MLB? Not a top 100 player? What? Brian was pretty stinky a few years ago, and I feel like that's in part why MLB kind of came to that decision that he's inconsistent, but he's actually not. If O'Neal Cruz sticks in center field, Nick York rakes, and Bubba Chandler comes up and is the 3rd starter in that Pirates rotation, I'm not saying the Pirates are going to win a World Series, but they're going to be good. So this is a personal decision for me. I got the St. Louis Cardinals most underrated player as Lars Nootbaar, and that's simply because I don't know why. I never really looked at his baseball savant. I didn't realize his ceiling. He has a top 5 eye, so like top 5 plate discipline in the game. He had a 351 on base. Not had. He's had it since 2022. He's tops in exit velocities, and also he has some pretty decent defense out there in the outfield. So I guess when you combine a guy who has pretty decent defense, his exit velocities are crazy. The speed's not too bad when he's healthy, and he gets on base almost 35% of the time. I just didn't know Lars was that good. For the White Sox, this is probably a cop-out pick because it can count as someone who just was written off, and maybe that's why he's now underrated. But then again, Luis Robert Jr. was pretty bad. It was a season from hell for both him and the team. So he hit 224 with an 87 OPS plus. The team lost the most ever. He's still 27 years old and a few seasons away from going 36 doubles, 38 home runs with 20 stolen bases and 13 outs above average. I mean, honestly, a season like that with the power, speed, and defense, it was historic. So this is just a personal reminder that Luis Robert Jr., he's still him. Don't count him out just yet. I think we have 4 teams left, and I'm looking at 4 consecutive relievers. I guess we'll just kind of talk about them pretty quick. For the Guardians, I got Tim Herron, who was buns in 2024 with a 5.5 ERA. He bounces back in the best way, a 1.92 ERA in 65 innings. He had a 137 batting average against his curveball with a 42% whiff rate and no slugging on the sinker or fastball. The Tigers, I almost gave it to Riley Green. I would have broken up the 4 consecutive relievers because Riley Green, I just wonder if people realize how much of an MVP he was last year. Obviously, he's not going to beat Aaron Judge in an MVP race, but that's how special he was. I'm going to give it to Tyler Holton, who has a 2.15 ERA since 2023. That's an insane amount of time. That's over 100 innings. He doesn't allow hits. He doesn't allow walks, which is awesome for a pitcher. And also, by the way, on every single pitch but his changeup, he holds hitters to a sub 200 batting average. Lucas Erceg of the Royals throws a bowling ball fastball. He gets it up to 100 plus miles an hour, just like Spencer Schwellenbach, the first guy that we talked about. This is a former shortstop turned pitcher. He's got to be in this video because people don't realize that Lucas Erceg, he's kind of a random name. He might have a top 10 slider in the game. He also has 140 strikeouts over his first 116 innings, and it blows my mind that he's a former infielder turned pitcher and he still has really good command. And last but not least, Griffin Jax. I almost went with Matt Wallner because people got to remember, Matt Wallner is the Thanos of baseball. But this dude barely missed a sub 2 ERA over 71 innings. That's a lot of innings as a reliever. Mind you, Griffin Jax was not good the previous few years. But he finally broke out and he has a multitude of cream of the crop pitches. His sweeper is the worst of his arsenal, and hitters hit 216 against it. What? So between the Guardians, Tigers, Royals, and Twins, did I get any wrong, or do you think that the relievers earned the most underrated tag? And there you have it, the most underrated player on every team in 2025, according to Fuzzy. This is probably my favorite video to make every year because I get to talk about guys that don't get a lot of love. They do, but also they don't. Do you think I'm dumb for putting Mike Trout and Jacob deGrom in here, or do you think that they've been a little too disrespected lately? What about the teams that had relievers? Do you feel like I missed out on a positional player or a starter? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a great day and be safe.